So people are coming in. Welcome, everyone. We know that you are waiting for us and can't wait to participate in this webinar with the Mount Vernon City School District. This is another virtual learning with Dr. Hamilton and guests. And we are so thrilled to be with you in this December and right before the holidays, and hopefully we're able to give you some tips that not only you can use with your younger children, but with your older children as well. As you all know, thank you. Happy birthday to me in the chat already. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As you know, I am Dr. Monica George Fields, and we have a special guest with us today who is a literacy extraordinaire. I am so excited to be co-presenting with her. She brings out all the creative juices and will talk to us about what we can do to support students at home, and so that during this time of virtual learning and also hybrid learning, that our children are not too far away from practicing their literacy skills and keeping those skills close to the heart and making them important so that when they re-enter school full-time and when they engage with their teachers during the day, during school, that they're not experiencing the same COVID slide that some other children may be experiencing. Dr. Hamilton will be joining us momentarily, and you know he always likes to kick us off, but we're going to end. And just like that, I have magic. He is here. And Dr. Hamilton will be kicking us off, and then Linda can introduce herself, and Dr. BC can give us some warm welcomes as well. Dr. Hamilton.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you find tonight's session to be meaningful and engaging. Tonight, we are focusing on literacy, and it is probably the greatest gift we can give our children by engaging them in literacy initiatives, and some things you can do at home as you engage your students in getting them to be proficient readers and writers and engaging them. I'll share a quick technique with you that I use with my boys. So both of my boys were reading by the time they were 4 years old. And one of the things that we did was we did put flashcards on everything: door, window, stove, refrigerator. Everything in our house had a flashcard on it with its name. And the boys would learn to recognize those words out of context, because once they begin to read them, we would take them off the refrigerator or off the door and start making sentence strips with them so that they could recognize these words and begin to read. So they were reading, and right now they love reading. Both of them are adults, and we have a family book club that they facilitate. So I'm sharing that with you just as a strategy of something you can do at home with your kids to get them interested and engaged in literacy. So that's just one suggestion. And the other thing I want to say to you is, as it relates to COVID, you know, we have had to change gears rather quickly to adapt to where we are relative to COVID. And we are obviously closed this week, but we are planning to move full speed ahead on Monday, December 14th, with our phase 3 reopening. So on Monday, we will have our phase 1, our phase 2, and our phase 3 students back. And I'm going to be sending you information about our testing protocol so that we can begin COVID testing to keep our schools safe, to keep you safe, keep your kids safe, and keep our staff safe. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it back over to Monica George Fields, and happy birthday, my sister. I hope happy birthday, my fellow Sag. Yes.
Yeah.
That's why we get along so well.
Yes, Sag. I couldn't be a better place than here with my Mount Vernon family. I've been in and out of Mount Vernon all day today, doing different things. So at least I'm with family. That's the way I feel about it.
We appreciate the partnership. Mount Vernon is better because we met. So
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, that's true.
That's
All right.
thank you.
without further ado,
Yep. So Dr. Hamilton, Dr. BC, do you have anything that you'd like to say before we get started?
No, that I just want to welcome each and every one, and that I hope they will, enjoy tonight and find it useful. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. So we have with us Linda Kasarjan, and Linda is literacy extraordinaire. I was saying right before you got on, Dr. Hamilton, that Linda has been a coach or literacy coach for Lucy Calkins' TC Reading and Writing Project, and she has provided literacy coaching around the city and in other states. And she is joining us from the balming, sunny state of South Carolina.
hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Monica. I'm going to introduce myself really quickly.
I am
On to that.
fan. I know Lucy Calkins through and through.
Yeah, it's all good stuff. So I have taught probably half of my career in New York City in the early grades, and then I came to the South, to Charleston, South Carolina, and I have been doing coaching and staff development and consulting all around literacy in the sort of pre-K to fifth grade realm is my focus. I had a short stint in middle school in Brooklyn years back, so I stretched myself there as well. And I have a 10-year-old, and that 10-year-old challenges me in her reading. She has her own path in reading, and so I'm constantly being challenged on how to find interesting ways to follow her lead. She used to follow my lead, and now I follow her lead. And much of what Monica and I will be talking about tonight is not only having this literacy work and integration and family time and home time and have this really wonderful opportunity to do some things around literacy that we don't usually have opportunity to do. So I'm slowly but surely beginning to think that this COVID life that we're in right now is a beautiful time just to make lemonade out of it, to connect with our kids and ways that they really want to learn through literacy. When we have kids in our classrooms, we have 26, 27 kids in our classrooms, we can't give them the one-on-one attention. We don't always know what they would prefer. Now they actually get to do, when they're virtual or hybrid, they actually get to do a little bit of more what they prefer. So we're going to give you some ideas around that. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So thanks, Linda. So everyone, as you can see, I have the agenda up, and for those of you who are joining us via telephone, we're going to be talking about 5 components of literacy and giving you, we're going to stop, we're going to make this interactive and ask you some questions. So we're asking that you respond in the chat and then you put your questions in the Q&A. And we're going to show you a video at the end. So we're going to talk about fun with words, extending learning beyond assignments, which will be very helpful and useful. And I'm sure your children's teachers will be grateful for any beyond assignment work that your children can do at home. Reading together, becoming an author, the family way, and the art of reading aloud. And so these are all tips as parents that actually Linda and I thought of and actually shared and did with our children. And in our schools. So we are excited to introduce these concepts to you. So the first thing we want to talk to you about is fun with words. And there are 3 things that I used to do as a parent and that I want to share with you. And I think that you would have fun doing this with your children at home. They are I Spy, and Dr. Hamilton, he just blew our surprise at labeling a room. So you know that this is something that you can do, and we're going to ask you to identify a room and put it in the chat that you think that you can identify and give up for your children. It's not always easy to go around and see these labels and index cards and Post-its stuck on your furniture and other things like that. So try to identify a room. When we get there, we'll show you what we're talking about. And then a good old-fashioned list. Listen, the way we learned is not out of style. It helps. So we're going to go over those things with you. And then for vocabulary building, we're going to talk about words in a jar, family word of the day, and story in a bag. And so without further ado, this is the I Spy game. So we have these different pictures here. And I just want to tell you that I used to play the I Spy game with my oldest daughter on a bus. I used to take the bus from the Bronx to Harlem to take her to my mother's house when she was really, really little. And one day she got in trouble. She's always in trouble. But this day she got in trouble before we even got on the bus in the morning. And there was an elderly lady or older lady sitting right where we would get on. You know, if you take the bus to work or home, you always get the usual seat if you're there at the same time every day. And we were. And so this day she had like tears in her eyes, and we got on the bus and I was quiet and she was quiet and I wasn't saying anything. And this woman tapped me and she said, "Miss, can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "You're not going to play the I Spy game today?" And I turned and I looked at her and I said, "The what?" She said, "The I Spy." She said, "Every day that you play that with your daughter, when you get on the bus, I play with you. I just don't say the answers, but when you say it to her, I'm playing it." I said, "Oh, okay, we can play the I Spy." So then my daughter wasn't in trouble anymore. So this is an example of I Spy. You could do it at home with spices, ingredients, and things that you have in your cupboards. And you can say to your child, "I spy a spice that starts with an O and has a second word with a B." Dr. Bennett Conroy, look at the cupboard and tell us, which spice do I spy?
Old Bay?
Yes. Dr. Hamilton, I spy an awning on the street that is red, that has an L in its name and an R in its name. What awning do I spy?
I Spy Latin Bar Restaurant.
Yes, and that is just as simple as it is, ladies and gentlemen. You just want to get your children excited about recognizing letters and words. You could do this in a newspaper. They don't need to read the entire thing. What you are doing is getting them to have word recognition, as Dr. Hamilton already said, in isolation. They don't need to have to read the whole thing, but you can also do it with, if you have ingredients out in your kitchen as you are cooking, you can say to your kids, "I spy a red object that starts with an O. Which one is it?" And then they would say, what, Linda?
Or peppercorn. Which one you talking about? Peppercorn or the red onion?
Right. But it starts with an O.
Onion.
Onion. Right. And so you can play this game with your children. It costs nothing, but it does expose them to word recognition. This is the strategy that Dr. Hamilton talked about using with his children. And I'm sure many of you here know that this is very easy to do. You can get some Post-its, you can get some paper, you can just get some labels. Now here we have full sentences, right? And we talked about, Linda and I talked about this, and this was something that I really tried to push. Let's have full sentences. Don't have to say a lot, but this is as you have these full sentences around on your labels, what children are understanding is that they're getting to know the word this, they're getting to know the word is, they're getting to know the word a, and then they're getting to know that vocabulary word that's describing the object that is stuck on. And so you can do this around your home. And if you see up at the top, it doesn't say this is a, it it says these are. And parents, what we want you to know is that the trajectory of reading from one level to another, that's what happens. All of a sudden, your children may be reading a book that starts with the same couple of words and same phrases from beginning to end. And then that last page will have a different phrase on it. And you can start to do that as well. You can do it with the one word, or you can do it with the full sentence. But what we're saying is that these labels stuck on objects in one room will give your children, it's just word recognition, and it gives them practice with identifying word to object, which is what we want them to do in early emergent literacy, is that they start to identify and attach the word to the object or word to the picture in the book.
Remember the
I'm
old
going to add,
years
oh.
we taught to read in run, Dick, run. See Spot run, 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 Spot run. We didn't know it was all repetition and word recognition. And next thing you know, you get to that new word that it introduced at the end of the book, and that would take you to the next part of the series.
Yep. And what were you going to say, Linda?
So parents, once if you get to this point where you've gone from single words to a sentence that has a similar pattern, then you, with your kids, you can take those down once they've mastered that, and they can come up and label things in sentences that don't have the same pattern, because you want to go up with them and you want to push them a little bit more. So they might, now, if you look closely at this room, and of course your rooms at home, you'll notice so many more things. Take these labels down. What else do you see? Your child can then do the labeling with you. They can come up with the phrase, and the phrase can vary, and you sort of raise it up a little bit more, a little bit more.
Yep. And so think about a room in your home that you're willing to sacrifice for a week or two to allow your children to label, especially as you have them over the holidays. And, you know, the holidays are coming and school will be out and children will be home. This will be something that they can do. Think about something, a room that they can label, or a part of a room that they can label. Put that in the chat so that we can give people ideas. It may not just be their bedroom. Maybe they share a bedroom with someone else, but put it in the chat. Where might you allow your children to actually label some parts of their room? Okay. And give us some ideas of what you might want to do with your children. And so finally, we have this. We have the sight words, the good old list. So I have my list here for you guys to see. And this list is the sight word list. And I have from first grade 100, the first 100 words, to the 10th 100 words. And you can get this from offline for free. You can also purchase the clear contact paper. The clear contact paper from the 99-cent store. Take one of those old key rings that you have hanging around the house in the drawer. You know that's that drawer that you put all the stuff in. And put a hole in the papers and connect it so that you have them all together. You can hang this somewhere, you can keep it somewhere, but here's the idea of what to do with this sight word list. What we're trying to do is help your children develop a sense of fluency. What we mean by that is that as they see these words, they get to know them right away. So when they see them in their book, when they see them in their reading, when they see it, when they need to write it, it's something that is very, very familiar with them. I do this work with my grandson today. What we do is every day he reads all the list. He's now up to 7th grade, and he can do it. We time him, we play a game. He can do it within 12 minutes, and he reads all of the words. But when he reads first grade, we stop, and then I dictate 4 to 5 sentences to him from those words. So it gets him to practice. When he gets to 2nd grade, we stop, and I dictate a couple of sentences. For third grade, we're using that for spelling. So he reads one list, as you can see, they have list 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once he reads one list, he stops, and then I give him 10 words from that list for spelling. He reads the second list, he stops, I give him 10 words, so forth and so on. Once he masters third grade, we will turn that into a sentence list as well. And I will just dictate a couple of sentences from him across the list and for words, and then we will move on to fourth grade being the spelling list. So every list we use for sight words, he recites every word from first to the 7th 100 words. And as he masters each list, it turns into either spelling or sentence dictation. I give him a short little sentence for him to write on his whiteboard. So I'm going to ask Dr. Hamilton, can you look at this second grade list and think of, and parents, as we do this, and audience, put in the chat a sentence that you can come up with that you can ask your child. It could be a nonsense sentence. It don't have to. Some of my sentences, he look at me and he said, Grandma, you know that don't make sense. I said, I know, but that's the best I can do tonight. So I just think of a sentence that you might be able to come up with from this list of words 1 through 4 for second grade. Can you think of one, Dr. Hamilton?
Sure. List 1 through 4. I feel great tonight.
You see all those words in the list? They gotta be in the list, Dr. Hamilton. You can't make up your own words.
Well, then your direction should be more explicit. I just, okay.
You have to use the words in the list because these are the words that the children would have mastered. So something like little line does change.
Very. Nope, I don't want to use that one. Sound. I don't know. You need some pronouns in here.
What about very, very old men learn?
Good. Okay, I see that one. Good boy ask.
And you could put in some shorter words that might be in first grade. So like I or me or place. Those type of words are fine too.
Here's a good one. Give help another try.
That's a good one. Give help another
That wasn't
try.
mine. I was reading from the chat. I can't take credit.
Oh, thank you, Alicia. Thank you. Give help another try. That's a good one. So you get the gist of it, right? It doesn't have to make sense. What it is that we're trying to get students to use, now that they've noticed it from sight words, they learned how to spell them, or now we're moving it into sentences and just giving them the opportunity to practice their writing and practice how to use these words in more than in a sentence or sentence structure. So go ahead.
That one, Patrice, do you want to go help Dad? That's a good one.
That's a really good one. Thank you for that.
I've got one.
What's that?
Change must help our world.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Change must help our world. Look at that. Look at everybody being all creative. We got to move on. We can't stick to this all night. We got a lot to show you guys. So this is one thing that you can do. And this is important, parents, because the research tells us it takes like 18 to 30 times for a child to be exposed to one word, depending on the structure of the word, before they really internalize it. And they have to be exposed to it in many different words, just not by sight, right? They have to practice writing it. They have to practice spelling it so that they're learning the structure of the word as well as the meaning of the word. And it takes 18 to 30 times depending on the structure of the word. And
so
that's why sight words.
By the way, if I can just jump in, just a quick commercial. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. I'm going to try to answer them while we're online. You can throw them in the chat or in the Q&A. even if it's not related to tonight and it's a burning question, you can throw it on there, okay? Sorry
Yeah.
about that. Go
No,
ahead.
that's okay. Great. Thank you. So go ahead, Linda.
So to make a connection to math real quick as we go to vocabulary is just like Monica stated, the number of times we need to practice and see sight words before we've internalized them. It's no different than when we had to memorize our multiplication tables. It didn't just happen in a week. My daughter, for example, she learned them the end of 3rd grade, and then COVID happened, and then we got rusty, and then summer happened, and we got rusty, and now we're doing long division, and we've got to go back and practice our multiplication tables. So it's constant and constant and constant until it's ingrained in our head. In that same way, so we got sight words, just mentioned the times tables, and now we'll go right into vocabulary and hearing vocabulary, seeing vocabulary, exploring new vocabulary to the point where we actually use it in our language, understand it when we read it, choose to use it when we write. Okay, I've got my own jar. The one Monica created is a lot prettier, but I do have a jar from some rice crackers that I found this morning. All right, in my jar is a whole bunch of words. I got this list from, can you go back one screen, Monica? Oh, it's not on there. Okay, that's all right. I'll remember the name of the site in a second. I went online and I thought I added it to the website, to the PowerPoint, but I think it was too late. And I just found lists by grade that would help you come up with ways to add to your child's vocabulary and really in a wonderful way, add to our own. We all get stuck using the same words. As a writing teacher, we always challenge our kids to use something besides good. We say good. I went to the park, it was good. I had a pizza, it was good. I had a good time. And those words get tired. And so I know as an adult, my daughter has her own YouTube channel, and I saw one of her first shows, and she used the word cool about every 3rd word. And I realized that was coming from me because I've been saying cool over and over again. Mom, you gotta up your vocabulary, right? Because I was sort of using the same tired word. So an idea, fill up a jar, any jar. This was from my pantry. It was from stale crackers. I emptied it out. We all have something like that. Or you finish it up. I filled it with words. So the examples on here are lamp, banister, fitness, swift, magnificent, cordial. Depending on your vocabulary, depending on your age, depending on your experience with language and English, you're going to have different words are going to be newer to you than others. So in my bag, I have in my jar, I have general, I have communicate, I have radiant, which makes me think of Charlotte's Web, right? Because it was written in the web. I filled it up with words, and what you can do with these is challenge yourself as a family. You could sit down together, everybody take a word, pull out the word. What do you have today? What do you have today? Oh, I have the word suddenly now. I could come up with a sentence with the word suddenly. We can play a game like we just did with the last list, and we could each put our words out, and we could come up with a story, and everyone has the word. And when it's your turn to add a sentence to the story, your job is to incorporate that word into the story. Right. And so we go around in a circle until you just laugh so hard you can't go any further. Right. You just started a new story, but different ways. So I mentioned the word good. What's another word for fast? Here's the word swift. How often do we use swift in our everyday language? I don't use it very often. Right. I say fast. I say, quick. I don't use swift. It's a nice challenge. Again, this is for adults and kids and at any age as well. Right. How else could you say polite? We have cordial on there. Polite's a great word, but you know what? Let's change it up a little bit. So we don't always say the same things all the time. You might sort of have a fun point system. If you have your word or a few words that you have, maybe you each get one each day. And after a week, you each have 7 words or maybe 5 words, depending on how many days you do. And as you watch movies and as you read books and as you watch your shows or some video on YouTube, when your word comes up, give yourself a tally on a chart. Who has the most by the end of the week? Whoever has the most is the one who's most likely been just paying the most attention. Right? Different fun things. It's really not about maybe that your word showed up 100 times, but if you weren't paying attention, you weren't going to catch it. So
Yeah.
tuning our ears into how can I sort of raise the bar on my vocabulary, but make a game out of it, make it fun, and especially as a family.
Yeah, and this is really a good challenge for older siblings to play and use with their younger siblings. So for families that have children in high school and middle school and in elementary school, or just at different levels, it's good for the older child to lead the game and challenge the younger child, and vice versa in these types of games as well. It doesn't have to be just with one child. It could be the entire family, right?
So going on, so again, you could even use the same jar, right? Same jar. You could put different words, change up the words maybe every couple weeks, but here's another opportunity is, let's just say I'm going to pull out my word. I'll take my word radiant, right? And I'm going to take my word radiant, and I'm going to put it, and this might be I might do this for the morning. I'm going to put it on the sort of nameplate. I'm going to put it on my neck. And I've done this with kids in the classroom. It's really fun up at any age. And you want to increase their vocabulary. You can also do this with sight words. And everyone has a different sight word. And your job is to use this word as many times while you have it on. And so maybe you have from, 8 to 10 in the morning, you wear your word, right? Maybe you take it off. Maybe you switch words with somebody else. Or maybe you put it back on later on and you try before dinner and everyone has their word on again. And the laughter and the cohesiveness. And again, it doesn't have to be with every member of your family. It could be who's at home, right? And if somebody is at work, you could actually include them for a break that they have at work. Maybe you have lunchtime. So some of you at home doing virtual or hybrid learning, some of people are at work. Maybe you have a word break, right? Just to have some laughs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then another way I added on to this is that box in the bottom is put your words together. Similar to the page prior to with the jars, put it together in a story. Put it together in a way that's funny, that's engaging, that gives you something fun to do. That's not your typical, here's a vocabulary word, here, write it in a sentence, underline it, then write it 5 times. And so that's your typical school kind of work. And it's effective because that rote kind of learning, that memorization is effective. But this is also a really great opportunity to change things up. And here are some ideas. Some teachers might do this kind of thing in a classroom. You could also do it at home and do it in your family way, right?
Mm-hmm.
A way that the classroom teacher would never think of to engage your family, because only you know the way your family would really have fun with this.
I'm going to do that during the holidays. I'm going to give people words that I know they don't know. I'm going to make them wear it and use it.
Yep.
And then they'll want to leave my house. How about that?
They don't like it, blame it on me.
Yes.
I love playing Words with Friends, Scrabble, like word games in general, but particularly Words with Friends, because it challenges you to stretch. And sometimes even taking a moment to look up a word that you don't know and make a point, and at least using that word at least twice is a practice that I use when I'm playing with people in Words with Friends who slaughter me. And there are a couple of people who beat me all the time. One of them's on this call, as a matter of fact. But she beats me all the time. But I love learning. Even at this stage in my career, I love learning new words that I get to learn how to use in and out of context. And Linda, if you could, and I don't want to hijack your agenda, but I think it's important for our parents to understand the difference between reading comprehension and fluency. Because a lot of times kids may be able to read a word, but that doesn't make them fluent if they don't know how to define the word or various meanings of the word. Fluency, I asked you to define it and then I'm doing it, but go ahead, I'll let you take it away.
There's nuances, and so much of that comes out with when you talk to your kids about what they're reading, you learn a whole lot about what they understand. So you could have a fast reader who flies through text, who understands all of it. You could have a fast reader who understands almost nothing, but they can say all the words.
Exactly.
Right? You can have a slow reader who has trouble with comprehension and understanding what the text means. You can have a fast reader. Quick story. My daughter, we had to evacuate for one of the many hurricanes here in South Carolina. And we actually evacuated to a hotel not that far away, but away from the water, inland. And we were sitting down. My daughter was about 4, and she did not have the sight word knowledge yet to read a book that she was sitting next to a little girl who was about 3 or 4 years older than her, who was reading a book that was a higher level. My daughter has always had very strong comprehension. She reads for meaning. She can figure out what a word is supposed to be without knowing how to read it because she gets what the story is about. She understands characters. She understands what it should say. The little girl who was reading next to her, because we sort of all were, the power went out in the hotel and we were all sort of pulled down in the lobby hanging out. And so we sort of met all these people. She's sitting next to the girl. And my daughter wasn't able to read this book on her own. But when that little girl got stuck on a word, because the little girl was reading it, my daughter told her what word it was. It was fascinating to me because my daughter wasn't able to read the word by herself, the book by herself, but she knew what should be there.
Mhm.
So, so fluency and comprehension is the most important thing there is. However, all of these activities all contribute to comprehension, right? All contributes. So we can be a fluent reader and be slower or faster. We can be a fluent reader. We can. Speed is not it.
Make you fluent.
Right.
But what does help is just like when you go to do division, if you don't know your multiplication, it makes it slower because you have to figure it out. If you don't know how to read the word together, like in a snap, it's going to slow you down when you read. So therefore you lose your fluency. And then for that, comprehension can be harder to get. So all of these things in a snap, just like your times tables, just like your sight words, and just like vocabulary and understanding the meaning, all come together to add to this level of confidence and greater interest in reading.
How can you teach? There's a question in here. How can you teach toddlers to speak? And that's a great question. Quick story. My youngest son is very, very bright kid, always has been, but he didn't speak until he was 4 years old. We thought something was wrong with him. I mean, we were taking him for hearing tests. We were taking him to all kinds of specialists, and he just did not talk. However, when he did start talking, the first thing out of his mouth was a complete sentence. He said, "May I have another slice of cake, please?"
Yes.
First thing he says. And we all turned and looked at him. So I'm saying that to say that sometimes children not speaking isn't necessarily indicative of a problem. And as parents, sometimes we think that, and sometimes that is the case, don't get me wrong. But in order to help children speak, I'm a big proponent of not doing baby talk to kids, to use appropriate vocabulary, to use appropriate inflections with your voice when you're talking to kids. And the best thing to do is provide incentives for them to speak. For instance, if you know they want the bottle, instead of saying ba 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 ba, for example, speak in a complete sentence. Would you like the bottle? Do you want the bottle? And have the kid mimic that with you. Have them say it back to you, not even necessarily for meaning, but just for familiarity with how to form letters and how those letters and those sounds make words. So that's a strategy that I used with my young one, as a matter of fact, that worked for him. And if you find that by the time children are, when you say toddler, I'm thinking 2, 3 years old, children really should have some words in their vocabulary by that time.
Yeah. That's really good. And just repeating what children are saying and correcting it. So instead of saying to them, that's not how you say, you just repeat it. So if they say baba and you say you want the bottle, it's just modeling how the pattern of speech and what they should be saying. So I have
Like,
here
my
story.
turn. Hold on, my turn. I have to add to that too.
Okay.
Reading. So talking to them and providing that sort of there's more the correct way to say things, but the more we read to them, the more that they understand story, they understand how you put words together to make that story.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that they understand exactly what you're saying when they say, I want you to read this book.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to read this again. I want you to read this one.
Mm-hmm.
You know it's clicking. Even if they
Yep.
don't have the language yet to express it,
Mhm.
it's all happening.
And we have an example of that at the end, right? Right,
Yeah.
Linda? So story in a bag. Story in a bag is something that I also I've been doing with my grandson at home as well when he's with me. And so these are 4 actual objects. So the game is that you allow your child to go and you give them a minute to go find 4 objects that do not match, right? So they can pick any 4 objects that they can find in the house. So, and what you have to do, and then you select 4 objects that you can find that do not match, not paper and pencil or a bag and something to put in it, because that would make it too easy. You want objects that really don't go together. These are 4 things he actually brought to me. And so they are a stapler, his goggles, which are right here. So he actually went and got his swim goggles and gave them to me. He got the stapler, he got the salt and pepper shaker, so the salt shaker, and a little marble. I had the marble out here so that I could show you what he had. It was like a little marble that he had. But in any event, he actually got these things and put them in front of me and challenged me. I had 2 minutes to tell a story about these 4 things. And as you practices oral language, it practices the beginning, middle, and end. It also gives them the opportunity. You can make the game a little more harder by requiring that they say a name or that they use descriptive words like the color of the goggles. These are kind of fluorescent goggles, so they're not really one particular shade that he put in front of me. These are his swim goggles, and they happen to be down here, and this is what he put in front of me. So I know what I said, and I know how I came up with a story for these 4 things. So I cheated a little. I picked something that I knew. I'm going to challenge. Here we go. Dr. Hamilton, you paying attention? I'm going to challenge this too. How did you know I was going to pick on you, right? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to come up with a story about these 4 things: a salt shaker, a marble, goggles, and a stapler. I actually came up with a story for this, so I already know what I said. I want to see what you're going to have to say.
Okay. As I was searching for my marble at the bottom of the sea, I put on my goggles and could taste the salt in the water as I made my way to the bottom. I stumbled and stapled and found my way and touched the marble at the bottom of the sea. The salt was so intense that I could feel the weight of the salt through the water as it pressed my body to the bottom of the ocean.
You must have been writing that story all along, Dr. Hamilton. Somebody told you. That's a better story than what I came up with.
Well, I have a flair for the drama anyway.
I said that to Linda. I said he's gonna love this because this is right up his alley. Oh my gosh, that was great. That was a great. But that's the kind of modeling we want to do for our children at home. We want them to enjoy the oral language of storytelling so that they understand the pattern of when they are reading a story and how it has a beginning, a middle, and end, and how many ways you can use salt water. I didn't even say that. I just said that I got out the pool and I was thirsty, and then I went and I ate some potato chips that were very salty. I just went left with my story. It was horrible. It was not. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to put these 4 things in front of him when he comes back down here on the weekend, and I'm going to pretend that I came up with the story. He'll never know. He's only 10. So we want to move right into extending learning beyond assignments, and Linda is going to introduce us to this concept as well.
So, my daughter is my what I get, who I get all my stories from. And my daughter was out with some friends this beginning of October, and we were swimming because it's Charleston and we can swim in October at the beach. And we just a couple of days later, she felt like she had a sore throat, and we got a little like, wait a second. She was with kids she doesn't usually play with because it was her preschool friends for her birthday, and we're like, okay, please. So we went and got a COVID test. Well, she's been in person learning, because in Charleston here we've been in person learning at her small school since August, and they have a plan. We've had some virtual days as a trial, but only some classes have had to go virtual. So anyway, back to the story, she stayed home for a day and a half. And I didn't have work for her. So I'm doing my own work, and I don't have work for her because she's not on virtual schooling. So the reason I say this is because we had to extend beyond the assignments. We had to extend, and here she is. We had to extend beyond what we thought the teacher would have given. And I got this because when we were doing her virtual learning in the spring, when it came to reading, it was a struggle to really have a lot of motivation around the reading. And she had a book. Can you hand me that book, please? Thank you. So she had this book, and she come here and stick your head in here because you're talking. Here she is. All right. Can you? All right. So she had this book, and she loves this book. And it's not a book that she was reading in school, because she didn't really get the impression that this was going to be an okay book to read in school, but she tried a little bit. Her level was a little higher, but she loves this whole series, this what was, who is. She just can't get enough of all of them. And so we sort of came up with an idea to do together, like a project, because the work that she had when she was doing her virtual learning were fill out a graphic organizer based on the book that you read, or fill out your reading log and have your parents sign it. And that was really the extent of the reading work. Read for 30 minutes and fill out this thing. And that just wasn't enough, right? So then we started to talk, well, what could we do to share? She loves this book. It's nonfiction. What could she do to share what she knows? And so we came up with an idea together. We got a used piece of poster board that we had from a party. We turned it over. So we didn't go to the store. We turned it over. And she decided that she was going to make a poster out of this and teach whoever wanted to know all about the San Francisco earthquake. And she spent hours on this. She must have spent 3 hours on this. She printed from the computer, from the printer, right from her iPad. She got her markers out. Monica noticed the other day when she wrote facts, she did these earthquake lines as if it had cracked down the middle of these facts. She was creative. She printed things. She glued things. She used her markers. She's an emoji fan. She put an emoji on there. She made it hers. And this is something that a lot of classroom teachers might do, but her classroom teacher was not doing. So when I say this whole section is personalizing the work for learning's sake, she actually got a lot more out of learning that day than she may have in school. And when our kids are at home, half day, full day, maybe once in a while, they have to go because of virtual learning, there's an outbreak, they have to come back home. We can really tap in to what interests our child. Again, like I mentioned before, when you have 26, 27 kids, that's not so easy. But we know our kids. And as older our kids get, we can say, what would you like to do? You need to do something. It needs to be around reading, or it needs to be around math. It needs to be around science. These are some ideas. What would you like to do? Some kids need more direction. Some kids will just go have at it. Some kids are in between. My daughter was in between. I gave her a little bit of direction. She went off on her own. She didn't come up for air for hours, right? The next day, I was telling Monica this the other day, she goes to school and she brings one of these books. It wasn't this one, right? It was this one. She brings this book to school to read some more during her reading workshop time. Her teacher said, that's not at your level. You need to choose another book. And my daughter, because she's one of those students who'll just put it down, and she went and got another book out of the library. And the whole fact that she did this project and this was a book that was meaningful to her, the Post-its were sticking all out of it already when she had it in school. And there wasn't a conversation about what she could do with this, or there wasn't a creative way to have that outlet. So we can do things at home, and we can personalize student learning that I should say our child learning in ways that isn't always done in school. Again, it might be done in school, but we can do it even more at home when we have these opportunities. So COVID sort of provides a little bit of that. This could get turned into a PowerPoint. A lot of our kids starting in 2nd, 3rd grade know how to do a PowerPoint, right? This could be a PowerPoint. This could be a comic strip. This could be a poster like my daughter tried. She could do something also on technology, like do a Prezi and have sort of talking figures, right? She could do a brochure. She could write a poem, right? If your child's an artist, get out the paints, get out scratch art, whatever you have at home, get out the watercolors, get out the crayons, and just make something that gets your kids to be excited about what they're reading.
Mm-hmm. So with that, so that was something, that was a project that Linda did with her daughter. And then I wanted to share with you something that I did with one of my children prior to pandemics. This was years ago. And so one of the things that we talked about of tips that we want, because this whole presentation is about tips, right? Things you can do at home with older children and with younger children, right? One of the things that I said to Linda, I said, at a certain point that children don't want to talk to their parents. And imagine being a child at that age, early adolescence, and you're home for the pandemic and you're home for an extended time. Well, I went through that stage as a parent, and then I had to create something that would continue or foster a level of communication with my daughter. And so on this slide, you'll see 3 books. And we started with the book in the middle called Mazin at Blue Hill. I found this book for my daughter when she was younger. She was in late elementary school, so maybe 4th or 5th grade. And I wanted her to read this book, Mazin at Blue Hill, but she didn't want to talk to me. So what I decided to do is I decided that I would read a couple of pages and leave Post-it notes in there for her to read. And then she would read those same pages and see my Post-it notes and then respond to them. And we would do that back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until we got to the end of the book. And I happened to find a page this is page 7 in the book, and I will never forget this page because she told me a little bit about something that happened with her when she was 7 years old that I didn't think that she remembered in her Post-it. So my Post-it here is in yellow. And I remember highlighting these. I wrote this today not today, but this weekend, just to jog my memory. And it may have been different words, but it was basically what I said to her on this page was about this sentence where it says, "Grandma shook my shoulders and grinned. What about this old lady, Mazin?" And so Mazin is on her way to this private school, and she's going to leave her grandmother in Brooklyn. And she is so smart in school that she is going to this boarding school. And her grandmother and she are talking about the process and Mazin having to leave home. And her grandmother says this to her. And I remember putting a Post-it about that for my daughter, saying, this is how sometimes people feel when they have to leave other people behind and move on. And that was my comment. She did not respond to my post. I will never forget that she did not respond to that Post-it. She responded to the part lower in the page, and it was so funny that that's the page that I got to. She responded to the point where Mazin was trying to stay home and get skipped. and where it says, suppose I stay home. What if I just skipped a grade, Grandma? Then I'd be okay. And her grandmother didn't want her to stay in the neighborhood and skip a grade. And I had forgotten that when my daughter was in second grade at 7 years old, I had to take her to the district office in Harlem, and she was in public school. And I had to take her to go see the pupil personnel director of the district for a conversation. And they wanted to skip my daughter in second grade. And we went to go see Narcissus Robinson. I will never forget. We went to go see her in her office, and she was talking to my daughter about skipping grades, skipping third grade and going to fourth grade. And my daughter had a meltdown. She cried and cried and cried. And I thought maybe she was thinking something bad was happening. And maybe she didn't understand it, but she cried so much that she cried until Narcissus Robinson said, she's not mature enough. She has to stay in her grade and go on to third grade in September. And 2 years later, a year or two later, when we were reading this book, this is the post-it note that my daughter put in the book. I remember when this happened to me, and I just cried until the lady said I couldn't be skipped. She did not want to leave her friends. I forgot all about it, but this was the text to self-connection that she made in this book that I totally did not remember. So we not only did, this was such a success that we not only did this with this book, Mazing at Blue Hill, the next book we did it with, and I remember our books, the next book we did it with was Of Two Minds. We did it with that book, which was more of a coming of age book. And then we also did it with I Am the Cheese, which became our family favorite. And so to this day, my daughter is in her 30s. To this day, we still share books. We still read books together. And this is a strong and supportive way to support your children at home, reading along with them. Just read a couple of pages, leave them some notes about what you think, and then let them read it. But I told Linda, here's the trick. Whatever life lessons that come up in these books that you are sharing with your child, you have to leave in the book. The trick is, if you want them to continue to engage in the conversation with you, you can't have the conversation face to face. So you're having this life lesson conversation, but through a story that you're both reading and sharing. Not at the same time. They don't have to sit next to you. You know they don't like you that much at 13 and 12, but they can read it on their own and they can tell you what they think later on, and then you can tell them what you think about the situation later on. And we did this all through her middle school, all through high school, and to this day, as grown as she is, we still share books. It has become a lifelong task that we do together.
That being said, as long as they want you to sit next to them and read with them, do it until they say no.
Yes. Right?
Don't do it. Don't get out early. Do it until they say, I don't want you here anymore. Because you never know, you can take it.
Yes. So with that, the other thing that we wanted to share with you is sharing stories, right? And so one of the ways that I want to encourage our families to start sharing stories is sharing stories about the family, letting their children do a little oral history. Remember the day when we were in school and we had to go home and interview one of our family members and get that oral history and write that report? And that's not something that, we would ask our children to do. It's usually a school assignment and they come home and they want to interview you about a particular thing. I started looking into my family structure and looking into my family and researching my family. And what I said to Linda was that I found out that my great-great-grandmother, who had the same name as my mother, was actually born in 1865. So she was born in North Carolina in 1865. As soon as I found out that she was born in 1865, it gave the Emancipation Proclamation that came out in 1865 a different meaning for me. I immediately was able to attach a person, not just a history book, but a person to 1865. I know that my great grandmother was born in 1865, the year the slaves were set free. And in my mind, that immediately clicked for me that, wow, she was born the year slaves were freed. And 1865 means something different. So I have stories about times when family members were born, or stories about our family members that I now connect to historical events. And I know that my grandfather he actually went to World War II, right before the day before my birthday. So today is my birthday, December 9th. I believe it was 1941, maybe it was my great grandfather, went to World War II, one of them, one of the Lawrences. And so I just remember now these dates because I've attached it to a family member. So that's one way that having your kids use this pandemic time to connect with family members, to get their oral stories, to start developing their own voice and story in your family is a great way to also help younger and older children connect to historical facts that they need to learn and know for school. Linda?
I'm just responding to, I want to just veer off just for a second. Someone is asking about engaging boys, since they are not always engaged with the same thing as girls. How do we keep them engaged when they don't want to read anymore? How do we help our boys with reading since they're different from girls when it comes to education? My daughter falls into this sort of category. She's not the typical girl who'll sit down and read a novel. My daughter, yes, she's not a boy, but she has the same kind of things that my nephew did. She loves graphic novels. She loves pictures. She doesn't, on her own, she will not pick up a book that is not filled with pictures. Not every 20 pages, every 2 pages or every page, she likes a picture. So she's strong with comprehension, but she loves that support that sort of keeps her engaged. She's not as interested. If I read the book without pictures, she's fine. She loves nonfiction. She loves her National Geographic magazine that comes every month, which they also have at the library. They also have it online. She loves that kind of thing because it has short snippets of text with lots of questions and engaging information, and not long chunks of text that kids can get distracted by. Their thoughts can sort of take them off the journey of the story. Song lyrics, right? I mean, we can get our iPhones and we can get Apple Music, and we can look up you don't even have to pay for it. Well, you can just look it up with Wi-Fi at home, and you can read the lyrics to whatever songs. Check them right, because they can be a little explicit, and you might not want that boy reading what they're reading, but know what they're looking at, because just like you want to know what they're reading for a book. But get the lyrics out, do it together, right? They can do it on their own. Directions for putting things together, tons of reading, right. Recipes. Just because you've got a boy does not mean they don't love to cook. My nephew was the struggling reader. He was in whatever pull-out group there was in school, from reading recovery on all the way into, he's now graduating from college, still has some supports, and he's full on taking it on and just doing well. But he loves short text still to this day. He's a mechanical engineer, so that kind of reading is shorter text. It's fascinating how we can define reading. Even if we don't even fall into that category, we as adults can define reading a certain way. But reading is, you can't get through a day without reading.
I want to I want to jump in there because you raise a good point. So I have two sons. So reading does not have to be formal. It doesn't have to be sit down, it's time to read, or that helps, but it doesn't always have to be that way. One of the things that I've told parents to do with boys a lot when they can't get them excited about reading is take them to Barnes and Noble in the magazine section. Doesn't have to be in the books, magazine section, and let them just read things in the magazine. They will find things there on cars, on sports, on entertainment, on fashion, whatever they are interested in. You can find a magazine in the magazine section of Barnes and Noble. Kids love that. So it's not always the task of going from cover to cover in a book. Just grab a magazine, let them find an article in that magazine. Sometimes you can have them grab a picture out of a magazine and tell a story about it. Picking a car, my boys love cars, for instance, so they can pick a car and tell their own story about that car, make up a story about how fast it may go, or what color they would want to paint it, or anything. And then that generates a lot of interest, but it does not have to be a formal cover to cover activity, because sometimes our boys will get turned off by that.
Yeah.
Particularly because sometimes our boys have attention issues and they can't stay focused that long, but they can read a 2-page article in a magazine.
Yep. Yep.
I'm going to add on to that. That was excellent, Dr. Hamilton. The thing, Monica just held up a book, and the great thing about nonfiction books, especially ones that have pictures like that, is they don't have to read this cover to cover. Like you mentioned, Dr. Hamilton, you could read a page.
Right.
Because that one page is on hurricanes, or that one page is on lightning storms, or that one page is on cars that can go to from 0 to 60 in whatever, 60 seconds, whatever it is, like 2 seconds. My daughter, sometimes it's a struggle to get her to sit and read for extended periods of time. So there are days when I just back off. We've got graphic novels going on. We've got things like Diary of a Wimpy Kid. We have that kind of text. But she will sit when I'm driving in the car. She'll take my iPhone and she will read the lyrics of Hamilton for the entire show's worth, the entire soundtrack. She does more reading on the soundtrack of Hamilton than she does in any of her books that she has at home. And the vocabulary is, it's a vocabulary lesson every day without it being formal, just like you mentioned.
Yep.
Comic books. Absolutely. Someone mentioned that in the chat box as well. Monica's holding up one now.
Yep. And this is the Underground Abductor. This is about Harriet Tubman. It's a New York Times bestseller. You can get it from Amazon. It's only it's a couple of dollars. You can go to Barnes and Noble. You don't have to buy it. You can go to Barnes and Nobles and have them look. But as you can see, the text is very short, right? It's just little boxes with a few words in it. And they can read a couple of pages or not, right? They can look at a lot of picture support in this, but it teaches them about the Underground Railroad. It teaches them about history. It teaches them about stories of the Underground Railroad. So the text comes in various forms, and it doesn't always have to be long and complicated. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Linda.
All right. So I'm going to go back to sharing stories real quickly. The bottom box here. Ask families, and Monica touched on this, but Monica's was more about the historical context. I'm also talking about talk to your family members about stories. You could focus on stories when they were little, or stories when they were teenagers, or stories when they were, high school age, or whatever it is, or story when they, first left home, if that's relevant in your family. The first thing they remember as a kid. And the beautiful thing is documenting this. It doesn't have to be fancy. It could be written down in a notebook, right? It could be something that you create online with, Shutterfly. It could be another PowerPoint. It could be something you staple together and you write it down, and you maybe stick a photograph of that person, a drawing of that person, something you can print out of that person. And you've got a family treasure. In one sitting, on a holiday, for example, even if it's a Zoom holiday, right? You've got a treasure that you can hold on to, and you can do that multiple times and ask different questions about different time in their lives. When we ask certain questions about people we've known for our whole lives, we find out things we don't necessarily know from our everyday conversations, right? And I'll give you two examples. One is my partner, Bernard. He came to visit my family in Boston, and he sat down with my sister's mother-in-law. Okay, families are all together, a whole bunch of us. And I never sat down with her. I knew her for years from church, and she married son married my sister, and he sat down with her. And he's a musician and an educator, and somehow they talked about music, and they talked about dancing. And he found out that she was a tap dancer, a jazz tap dancer, when she was young. I only knew her from an Armenian church when I was a kid. She was already an old lady who had trouble walking. I never knew anything about that part of her life, but he found that out. So they're gems, right? There are gems that we don't share because it just doesn't come up. Funny story. About a couple years ago, my daughter was getting a little frustrated once in a while, and she would stomp out of the room. Okay, and we have her come back, but she did a lot of stomping. Well, one day she's in the bathroom doing her hair, and the bottom cabinet under the sink is open. Well, she's mad at me, and she stomps out of the bathroom. Well, she stomps right past the cabinet door and takes the cabinet door with her, and it snaps in half. Okay, and so she broke the cabinet door. We have since clamped it together with magical glue. But anyway, that led me to tell her a story when I was little, and my room was next to the kitchen. And so when I got trouble, when I was sent to my room, I would slam my bedroom door. And somehow my door had, if I slammed it again with my hand, it clicked again. And that click was really satisfying. And one day I slammed it and pushed it really hard to get that click. And my hand broke through and broke the molding of the door. Then I told my mother about, I forget how it came up with my daughter and me. My mother told us that when she was a kid, now my mother is Miss Perfect and she never makes a mistake, right? Never loses her temper. When she was about 7 or 8 years old, she got mad at her mother. She kicked her foot right through the cabinet window in the kitchen. I mean, the cabinet door in the kitchen. I never would have thought in a million years that my mother would do this. That could be a whole page in our family story. Each of us.
Get rid of all the doors in your house.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, if I kick in the door in my house, I'd have a story.
Hey, it's not gonna boy. You won't have a foot to kick. You won't have a foot to walk on.
I don't know what happened to my mother, but I'm sure it wasn't pretty. She didn't share that part. So putting these stories in a book, again, it could be something you do once a year. It could be something you focus on for a month. It could be something you do in a day. There's a
question that's in the Q&A, and it surfaced about 3 times already in a different form, and I want to respond to it. And it's about keeping kids engaged when they get around their early adolescence. Kids are trying to find their independence. So don't take it personal if they don't really want to engage with you or don't want to talk to you. Give them their independence. That's important for kids to have, but create new ways to engage with them. Find something that they're interested in and don't make it about a task or a chore, but a very organic kind of relationship that you build with your kids when they get around 6th grade. You'll start to see that's when relationships with their peers get really, really important. That's when they'll start paying more attention to their appearance. Things along that line. Let them have their independence, but set boundaries for that independence. Give them space, give them parameters, and then you create a small place as a parent where you keep that connection, whether it's around a meal that you cook together, whether it's about a conversation about family history, whatever that you may find a common ground. Let that be your connection with your kid. But don't be offended when kids start to pull away from you as a parent around that age. It's very natural, very organic, and they need to do that. That's part of maturing and coming into their own. So don't be alarmed or don't be offended when kids no longer want to engage with you.
Mm-hmm. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about that sharing that book, but separately. I read my pages during my time and left notes, and then she took the book and she read what I had to say. So she didn't have to hear my voice. She didn't have to sit with me, and she could do it on her own time. But I knew that I was communicating to her about life lessons in those adolescent books. Linda, we're almost short of time. We do want people to have the opportunity to ask the superintendent questions. So Linda's going to talk really quickly about this, and then we're going to show you these two videos, 1 minute each, of what happens when you reread stories to a child.
So my daughter, who I keep mentioning, I have one. We have our ritual of reading together every night. Now that ritual is changing because she's 10 and sometimes she reads on her own and sometimes she wants mommy to come read her or her daddy. But there was a time when every single night it was, she got the pile of books, she put them in order. Mommy, this is what I want you to read. Sometimes we got through the pile, sometimes we didn't. And we read this same book over and over again. I will tell you this quick story. I was doing her hair one night. I didn't have time to read and do the hair. So I said, while I do your hair, you take read the books. She said, what? I said, go ahead. So she took the book in her hand, which is what you just saw on the previous screen, which is the Gruffalo. I've probably read it 30, 40 times to her over a period of years, 2-3 years, maybe more. I had no idea that she was internalizing the book. It was one of the ones that kept getting picked. Sometimes I picked it, sometimes she picked it. So this is the first time that she ever had the book in her hand and read it on her own. And granted, this is when she's 4.5, and she's reading the way she read at 4. All right. May have been different the way Dr. Hamilton's boys were reading at 4. This is the way she was reading at 4. So just pay attention to what she's doing.
The Gruffalo. A mouse took a stroll to the 3 dark woods. The fox saw the mouse, and the mouse looked good. What are you doing, little mouse? I'm having lunch with a Gruffalo. Come and have lunch in my underground house. No, thank you, but no, I'm having lunch with a Gruffalo. What's a Gruffalo? A Gruffalo? He has long tusks and sharp claws and very stinky jaws. And
Parents, she's not reading. She's not attending to that text. She's not reading the words on the page. She understands the story. She remembers the story. She's reading what she remembers. The tone, she's remembers some of the phrasing. She is remembering some of she knows that there's rhyming, and she is searching and searching to get the exact words on the page the way she remembers when I read it to her over and over again. I had no idea that that was going in her head. I thought it might, but we never gave it a try. Fast forward 2 years later, that was pre-K for her. Now fast forward end of first grade. Same text.
I clicked on it, and here we go.
Same exact text.
welcome to Reading is Fun Camp. Today we will be reading The Gruffalo. You can see how kids sound out words. Now they figure the words out by seeing the word and seeing the letters.
And she is too cute.
So let's keep watching. A mouse took a stool. What is this word? I wonder. Let's read it together. A mouse took a stroll through the deep, dark wood. So that is one reason how kids sound it out, by going back and looking at what the sentence says.
Love it. Oh, I love it.
So
He is
has
too cute.
combined what that bedtime reading, right? That cozy bedtime reading of reading. I'll read the same book every night if she wants me to. She's combined that with what she's learning in school, the language she hears from me, language she hears from her dad, language she hears from her teachers, putting that together to have, now she's ready for an instructional video at age 6, right? But it's the same text. And so I urge you parents to really take your child's lead, to bring tons and great books around them, and then take their lead, what they want to hear again and again. And sort of to tag on what Dr. Hamilton mentioned about the interests of your kids, it might not be your favorite book, but if that's what they want to hear over and over again, suck it up and read it. Sneak some other stuff in there that they might want to read too, that you choose. But if the interests are, for example, if you have no interest in cars, Dr. Hamilton, you mentioned your boys like cars. If that's what they are interested in, then you need to get interested in cars,
Exactly.
right? You need to follow their lead, because you need to know what they're doing and what they're interested in, even if it's not what you want them to be doing. You got to be involved in it. So if it's about, whatever it is, if it's about video games and you're not into them, you better get into them.
Yep.
Learn about them, study them, learn how to code.
Another question I'll share with the group is that was posted in the Q&A was about math and reading and math, how to connect them. The best way to connect reading and math and have fun is through cooking.
Mm-hmm.
It's follow recipes,
Mm-hmm.
read directions, and there's fractions, there's measurement, there's proportionality, all kinds of math concepts in cooking, and kids learn multi-step directions when they are following a recipe, and it's fun because they're not thinking about the words or the math, they're thinking about the finished product. So I always tell people when I get that question, that is the best way to connect math and reading. Kids hate word problems. So sitting kids down and making them dissect a word problem will turn them off to reading and math. But you can do it by following a recipe and even getting them to write out their own recipe. Like kids may make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, for example. You can teach them how to write directions for how they make their own peanut butter and jelly sandwich. A tablespoon of peanut butter, 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. I happen to like a greater proportion of peanut butter to the jelly, so I'll use 2 tablespoons of peanut butter to every 1 tablespoon of jelly. That's just me. So that's a great way to get kids excited about that.
Yep. And I have 3 girls, so I wasn't used to raising a boy, and I don't raise him. But when my grandson comes down, I told him, I said, you asked me to bake you something. I love to bake. And you say you're going to do it with me halfway in, you're abandoning the kitchen. And I'm stuck making the recipe for myself. But what I found that I can do is I can give him the list and he can go and pull out everything and set up our area for what I'm baking or what I'm making for him. So I will tell him the different things, and that reinforces the reading as well.
Exactly. And following directions.
And following directions step by step. Exactly. And then he goes off and does what he wants to do, but I engage him in some type of way.
Yeah.
We're at Q&A, Dr. Hamilton. There's a question in here. Did you see the question of how do you engage a child 6th grade that lacks interest in reading? I know you said a little bit.
I did, and I actually wrote back to Wanda on that. But again, it's finding, even, let me tell you, kids love the pop culture. have them, you can ask a kid about Cardi B. They can tell you anything you want to know about Cardi B. And I think she's beautiful until she opens her mouth, but that's a whole nother conversation. But if kids want to read about Cardi B, Google Cardi B on your telephone and let them read Wikipedia about Cardi B. They will be fascinated. Just learning about her upbringing, learning about where she's from, learning about how she got started. That's one way that you can engage a sixth grader who may not have an interest in reading. You have them reading and they don't even realize that it's about the reading. I use Wikipedia for just about everything. I love looking at old movies and then going back to see if these people are still alive and reading their story, wondering when did they get started, who were they married to. You will be it's just so fascinating to find the connection sometimes to old television and new television, new series. So you can engage your kids about a TV show that they're interested in. And again, have them look up the cast and read about the cast. And again, not making the focus. Reading is supposed to be fun. And as soon as you get into an argument about your child reading, you are putting barriers in the equation. And reading is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be a chore. And I know sometimes as a parent, we want our kids to read and we may get frustrated with them and we go to your room and you read this book. I never would associate any kind of discipline with reading. Because I always wanted my boys to keep that separate. And I think that's a part of why they have such a love for reading to this day. It was always a separate and apart. Even if they had to be sent to their room for disciplinary reasons or whatever, I would never make them go and read something. I may have had them write a letter of apology or something like that. But it wasn't about the chore as much as it was the lesson associated with it.
So thank you, Dr. Hamilton. We are at 7:31 and we always want to end on, I know, right? That was fast. See, all my tricks, all my tell a story. I'm not doing that game with you anymore. I'm not playing with you because I will never win. I can't, I need somebody who don't know how to do that better than I do for me to play with them. So I have to find somebody else. So I want to thank everyone. This was very interactive. We appreciate all of your comments that you put inside the chat. And thank you. And as we were just wrapping up, I got a vase full of flowers and roses from my daughter, Turquoise. Thank you, Turquoise. I know she's going to watch this. She's such a sweetheart. She's such a sweet baby. She's my favorite.
Doesn't fall far from the tree.
That's my favorite. Just in case the other two are watching. But thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We had a great time, and we hope that you went away with some suggestions of what to do with your children at home. Good night. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday.
Everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much for
having me
tonight.
Thank you, Dr. BC. We'll see you. Stay safe, everyone. Put your mask on.